Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Would you like to save time by solving the right problem sooner with a realistic and measurable plan? Reduce overwhelm by finding more sustainably productive ways to work? Improve employee morale by creating more positive workdays from within? Stay competitive by tightening your turn or increasing your agility in adapting to changing customer demands? If you said yes to those things, then we have the solution for you. What you can expect? Increased influence with stakeholders at all levels, immediate improvement in meeting effectiveness, significantly reduced change pain, reduced organizational waste, reduced cost of initiatives, get to conclusions faster and stick to those conclusions, effective planning and communication to ensure buy-in and smoother transition times, help identify and solve the right problems and select the right solution options, projects finish on time, on scope, on budget. You'll get 8 full-day virtual sessions over 10 months, plus 6 hours of one-on-one coaching, 8 hours of intentional networking, and 8 hours of personal reflection. The growth that we've seen is absolutely unparalleled. Our participants of prior cohorts have remarked about how phenomenal their results have been. This June, you could start your journey of becoming a certified changemaker through our Changemakers program. Welcome, everyone. I am so delighted to have you here. This is Sinikka Waugh. This is the Even Better podcast. I am so delighted that you took a moment to join us today, because this is part of our ongoing mission here at Your Clear Next Step to help us all have even better days so that together we can co-create better communities. I have with me today our wonderful guest, Dan Tocchini. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Sinikka. It's my pleasure.
This is going to be so great. I am so delighted. I have not known Dan for very long. In fact, we've just met very recently. We became acquainted through a connection that I can't even trace back, but I am just delighted and looking forward to this conversation. So if you want a quick bio, we can talk about a couple of things. We know lots of career experience. I know lots of clients with big names, big industry names that you're going to know. You're going to know words like Disney. You're going to know words like ESPN. You're going to know words like Microsoft and Nike and Virgin and big names. So you're going to understand as you listen to Dan talk today, listeners, as you're hearing Dan talk, you're going to know that he's been in the industry. He's been around for a bit. We know that he's been transitioning individuals and teams and organizations to a better state, right? From where they are to where they want to be. This is what we do here at Your Clear Next Step, right? We move you from where you are to where you want to be. And Dan's been doing this for 30 plus years, right? He's been doing this for a while. So he's got this great history and a great story that he's going to be talking to us about. He's not a newcomer to the field, not a newcomer to the industry. And he's going to share some of these things, some of his stories with us today. And specifically, the topic we're talking about today is 6 steps. So Dan's coming to us today with 6 steps to prepare for conflict. So Dan, tell us a little bit about you, and as you weave into that, let's talk about conflict. Why conflict? But let's start with who you are. Just give us a little bit. I introduced you just a little, but tell us a better story. Who are you?
Well, where I came from was an Italian-American family. My grandfather came over from the old country, entrepreneurial. In fact, he was a little disturbed that I wanted to go to college. He couldn't figure it out. We had a family business. He's in the movie business. And my father's in that business. My grandfather opened the first talking theater north of San Francisco. My dad took it and grew it to one of the largest, our top 12 or 13 movie theater circuits in the country. I did it as a young man, really enjoyed it. Had a tough childhood, though. I mean, my mother was a schizophrenic, and man, it was all kinds of conflict in the home, and really working was a way to get away. And at a young age, went through addiction and came out of it. I've been, clean for 40 years, but a lot of conflict, just a lot of conflict in the family, a lot of conflict in kind of getting my life established. And I think until I was about 28 or 29, when my son was born, my wife and I struggled, and we really got clear. And we worked together. Aileen and I worked together most of our lives, and we had numerous businesses, from movie theaters, and I had a shipbroking business. I've been involved at a young age. I got involved with a number of businesses, sports signia stores when they were popular, built a small chain and sold it, did a number of things like that. And I had been involved in the human potential movement early in the 80s and learned a lot about human potential and human performance. And I'm a voracious reader. And I got involved, and with my business background, got involved with companies. I remember my first RFP was to ESPN, and I got the job to restructure their finance department with them, and it went really well. And there's a lot of conflict in that. I mean, in fact, how I got the job was really crazy. There were two big consulting firms, and they had come in and they'd done their job, and they put their proposals on the CFO's desk, and one was like this, and the other was like that, and I had a 2-pager. And she was an awesome gal, this really powerful CFO. They'd hired her. She just retired. Her name is Jeni, and she retired a few years back. But I'll never forget, they called her the Dragon Lady, and because she was tough, and they couldn't figure out why they had this turnover. And she sat me down in the office. Each consulting firm presented their proposals. So I give her the 2-page, and I look at the other ones, and she says, "So tell me, what do you think in a nutshell? I don't want to read this now. What do you think the problem is?" And I remember I just told her, "Look, I'd really like this work, but I'm not going to lie, because if you give me the work on a lie, then I'm not going to, you're going to be disappointed, because I'm giving you what I think you want to hear, but I'm going to tell you, you're the problem." And that didn't go over. That went over pretty well with her. She looked at me and she goes, "Well, tell me more." And I just talked to her. I just said, "I know you're high powered. They call it what they're afraid of you." We interviewed their staff, obviously. And I said, "They've got a lot of good ideas. These are top MBAs. They don't want to stick around and just push widgets. They want to be creative. They want to implement. They want to take out legacy systems, put in new, more relevant systems, et cetera." And she looked at me and said, "You got the job. I understand you. I don't understand a lot of this, but I understand this." And I got the job, and it went really well from there. But I'll never forget the ability to navigate conflict. I call it the yellow brick road to success, because where responsibility is abdicated, possibility lurks. If you think about it, most people, when we're in conflict, don't want to take responsibility for what's going on. They equate responsibility with blame. Yep. And then it's the opposite of blame. It's like blame, shame, and credit are all about justifying the past, whereas responsibility is about standing for the future, regardless, and really embracing what you have to bring forth the future in what you have. So, it's the old Stoic saying, the obstacle is the way. And so to know, normally people run from conflict or stay away from it. Rather than think about, what is it? How do I need to stand here to open up? What do I really want to have? And there are 5 basic or 6 steps you can use to prepare. And that's probably the biggest breakdown in most conflict resolution, is people aren't prepared. They're not clear what they want out of it. They're not clear about what can happen if they don't have it, what's at stake. All these things are in there. So the first step in preparation is to get clear what the conflict is about. Like, what's the issue? What is this conflict about? Or what do you think it is? And I tell my clients, write this stuff down when you're preparing. So write down what you think the conflict is. Now, when you get clear about that, write down an example of the conflict that you're describing. Give the person an example so they can contextualize what you're talking about. They now have a backdrop. They understand what you're seeing.
All right, I'm gonna pause this for a second there, because this is where I can see we're gonna go deep, and we're gonna really unpack this. So as we're pausing for just a second, and already, because I'm in the Midwest, right, and we're Midwest nice over here, and there are listeners, and I'm doing it myself, so I know our listeners are doing this too. So listeners, don't go away. Like, pause for a second, come back, just come back. We're Midwest nice, so we're not really talking about conflict here. I know we're talking about conflict, but we're not gonna have conflict while we talk about conflict. Yes. We're not gonna have conflict conflict while we talk about conflict. I got to bring us back. So let's talk about why conflict is important. You said something just really, really beautiful, that conflict and the blame and shame and even credit are about the past, responsibility for the future, and take ownership for the future. And this is just really, really beautiful. So I just want to pause right there. The other thing that I want to make a note of for our listeners is many of our listeners. So as you're listening to this right now, you may be thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, this guy is a serial entrepreneur. Sinikka, I am not a serial entrepreneur. Yep. And yet we all have conflict. You may think to yourself, oh, I don't come from an immigrant family. Yep. Great. And yet we all have conflict. You may think to yourself, I didn't do anything in the 80s. I wasn't even a dream in the 80s. Yep. And yet we all have conflict. So stay with us, folks, as we think about this message, these 6 steps. This is for all of us. And as we move into, for those of you who have been following along with the Even Better podcast for our last 100 episodes, we've been helping people have better work days for 100 episodes. And as we shift our direction right now, this is so, so powerful, because we are helping now empower ourselves. It's not just about helping other people have better work days. These are action steps that we can do to help ourselves have better work days so that we can co-create better work days around us. So we don't have to wait for someone else to be better at conflict. This is stuff for us. This is stuff for you. Okay. So Dan, thanks for letting me pause.
Well, great point. Great point, because there are 3 steps. If you're going to lead others, you have to manage yourself first. I have to lead myself first. And if you're, and look, nobody, I don't know anybody who just loves conflict until they see the possibility in it. And even then you're always nervous. And so what I'm talking about, by preparing, you're going to reduce a lot of tension that you carry, because you're going to have a sense of why you're there and what you want to accomplish and what's at stake and what's possible if you come to a resolution. So then that's what this process will do. It'll help you get clear, and you're going to feel much more confident. And when people see, like, you ever get in an argument and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. And then somebody comes along and says something and you go, I never tried that. I didn't think about that. And then all of a sudden you have a new courage to go after it, because you see a new way to approach it. And that's my commitment here, is if I can help you see a new way to deal with the conflict, you're going to be, conflict is a great opportunity to deepen relationship. It's a great opportunity to forward a commitment and to improve your own self-confidence. So, so that's my commitment when I'm talking to you about it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love it. So we're going to get clear on what the conflict is about. We're going to write it down. What is it about? We're going to write it down, and we're going to help present it back to them. Is that all still that first step?
Yep. That's and then the second step is come up with an example of where the conflict, how you see it, like something that happened that demonstrates the conflict between you and the other parties, right? Here's what I'm talking about. Now, look, you want to speak as if it's true, because it's true for you, but you want to listen like you might be missing something. So make sure that, because it is true for you, but be open to the fact that when you're done speaking it, there might be something in there you're missing, and you might be in that might change everything, right? So when I'm preparing this, I'm always, before I sit down, I'm always thinking, I'm going to speak this because it's true for me, but I'm going to listen. I'm going to let them know I'm going to listen. Like, what could I be missing? Right. So that's going along. So once I give them the example, they can anchor into it. You want to say?
Yeah, to me, it's like that beauty of tuning instruments at an orchestra. I'm gonna play like it's true, and I'm gonna listen like I'm off.
Like I could be off.
Like
and
I
I
could
want
be
to
off.
find it if I am. And so many times, I'm married now almost 50 years. And so, this is, and quite frankly, my wife had a lot to do with this. So I'm not taking credit for what I'm giving you. We've worked through a lot of things together, and we're business partners. We work in the same business, and, she's my companion warrior. I don't, she's got, where we work with each other, we edge each other to get better at what we do. But this is something we've worked with each other. So this is not just business. This works everywhere. Right? So Get that example. Now, once you get the example, you said here, and by the way, when you're preparing, when you give the example, you might even get clearer about what the problem through this process and keep redefining the problem. That happens commonly. That's what part of the preparation is to get really clear. So clear statement, example, and then what happens for you when when this happens, when this issue comes up. Here's what I experience. I feel like you're not listening, or I feel like, what I say doesn't seem to get across, or you're not hearing me, or whatever you're hearing isn't what I'm saying, or I feel like I want to shut down, or I want to attack, or what. You just tell them what you experience so that they know what goes on for you. And then the next step, fourth step, is take responsibility. Own the part you have in contributing to the breakdown. Here's how I've contributed to this problem. Here's how I've contributed to this issue. I didn't speak up, or I didn't stop talking and listening. And there's a million things I want to take hold of as much as I can that I've done or not done that's contributed to this breakdown, to this issue.
Dan, what happens if we skip that step right there? What happens right there if we skip it?
Well, a couple of things. One, when I do that, it lets the other person know it's like an offer. It's like a peace offering. I see you're not to blame. I'm not blaming myself, but I see I've contributed to it. So it's like an act of good faith. It shows I've taken time to consider it. I've considered you. I've considered my impact. I want you to know what I'm experiencing. And I do see that there are aspects of this, and it might be this much or it might be that much, that I've contributed to this issue. Yeah. And what that does is the other person will relax a bit, and they'll be much more willing to look into what they've contributed, most likely. Now, if they don't, you can stop there. I mean, like if you're just preparing, these are all things that if the more you flush them out, the better the more grounded you're going to be when you go into the conflict, when you go into talking about it. So once they hear how I've contributed, the next step is, look, this is step 5, I believe. If this continues, here's what I think is at stake. If we continue in this issue, I'm concerned that this future's coming. I call that the parade of horribles. Like, if we continue to avoid this, here's the price we're going to pay with penalties and interest probably later.
Yeah.
And I do that for me, because a lot of times when I'm preparing, I don't want to go have the conversation. I think it can get resolved without having the conversation. But when I start to look up at, and if I can put down a pretty powerful parade of horribles, it motivates me to have the conversation, because I'd rather not have that. I'd rather deal with the conflict than end up with that. It's like, I'd rather have the short-term pain for the long-term gain, right? Rather than the short-term relief of not having to talk about it. I end up with a long-term grief of whatever I'm going to inherit.
Yep, for sure.
Right. So those are, and why I do that is because the humans, there's all kinds of research on this stuff, but humans are 5 times more likely to take action on something they want to prevent rather than take action on something they want to have. So if I can up the pain in my own sense of pain, right, about what's coming, I'm going to be more motivated to sit down, hear the other person, prepare, really do something, like get into it so that we can resolve it, because I'm aware of what's at stake. Right?
Yeah.
So that takes some discipline. And sometimes I'll sit down if I've got an issue with a client, and I'll do this. And if I get stuck, I'll say, hey, Aileen, or I have a number of partners. I can have my wife sit down, or others, and say, what do you think? What do you think happens if we don't talk about this? I mean, there's ways to go even get coaching or counsel in the preparation before I sit down. And the more that I do, the more human I am when I sit with the other person, the more room I have to hear them, because I'm clear about what's going on for me, and I'm open to what I might be missing. And I let them know this is what I'm about. And the 6th step is, here's what I'm committed to no matter what, right? I tell them what I'm committed to. and I'm open to what they have to say. I would, and in this 6th step, I'm committed to this, and here's what I'd like to do. Here's a proposal. So now the proposal might just be a request. Like I might just say, I'd appreciate it. Like maybe it's, you didn't come talk to me before you went to talk to somebody on my team. You were upset, and you should have come to me first or whatever. I might just say at the end of the conversation, my request is that before you go talk to somebody on my team about something that's not working, please come to me first. I might have been the one who caused it or whatever. I'm just making something up.
Yeah.
It might be that simple, just a request, but it could be a proposal.
Yep. Could be that here's what I can do. Here's what you can do. Here's what we can do together.
Or it might be, let's sit down and think about how we can work through this. I'll come up with a proposal. You come up with one. But at the end, I would say, okay, I have this. So when I'm talking to the person, they can interject, they can say what they think along the way, and I don't lose my way. I'm prepared. If they go off on a tangent, I'll go with them so I can hear them, so they can feel listened to. And then I can come back to what I had prepared. And I'll probably learn something on whatever tangents they go on that will help me temper what I have to say anyway.
Yeah. So these 6 steps, as I'm thinking about this, these are your 6 steps to prepare for conflict. These are not necessarily 6 steps in the dialogue, right? I'm not saying this is my part, or you're not saying this is your part and my part, and we're having a back and forth dialogue. This is my discipline. This is my accountability to make sure that if I know I'm entering conflict with someone, or I'm going to have a tough conversation, it's my responsibility to do this homework before I sit down in that conversation, right?
Yes. And think of it like you're going treasure hunting, and this is the map. You're gonna go mine for present, and you really want to be prepared, right? So I might, if I open up the conversation, I might do steps 1 through 3 or 4, and they might intervene, they might interrupt along the way. That's okay. I can listen to them because I know where I'm at. If I've prepared it, I'm sitting there. And then I can honor if they need to say something, I want to hear it, because if people need to say something and they don't get to say it, they're not going to hear you anyway.
Mm-mm.
Right.
No.
Now I could also say, can you just let me finish what I'm saying in this part? And then I want to hear everything you have to say. Right. And a lot of times I'll ask people, what did you like? A lot of times, think about this. If we're having a conversation like we are now.
Yeah.
Well, we have the ability to we can actually understand 450 words in a minute. We can't speak that fast. That's why when you listen to those advertisements that are really fast, you understand them, right?
Okay.
Because you have all this RAM. So when you and I are having a conversation, not only are you and I having this conversation, but you're having a conversation, and so am I about the conversation. Mm-hmm. Is this useful for my listeners? Is this something they can use? Is it a conversation that's relevant? Like, we have all these different conversations about the conversation. We also have a conversation going on about how we're doing in the conversation.
Yeah.
And then we also have a conversation about the other person. Do I trust them? Are they listening to me? Are they da?
Yep.
So all those are going on at the same time. And it's very easy to mistake what I'm making up for what you said.
Yes.
And how often do I parse that apart? So I want to be prepared so I can understand what I'm hearing. Is what I'm hearing what they're saying and meaning, or is it the meaning I'm putting on it and then holding them responsible for it? And if I can tease that apart and they see I'm concerned about that, if they see the care and concern I put into hearing them and really understanding what they're saying and taking responsibility for what I want to impart, it opens up a fellowship, like a shoulder to shoulder rather than head to head.
Right. Well, and if in that moment of conversation, so let's take this to a regular workday. If in that moment of conversation that you just described, where we're having our face-to-face conversation plus the dialogue about how it's going and how I'm showing up and whether or not you're showing up and what's happening before and after, if in addition to that, we've got cubicle left, cubicle right, and multiple conversations going on there, plus we've got phones ringing, phones distracting, alarms beeping up, notifications of new messages, email going on, and in addition to our conversation that's happening here, heaven forbid, one of us forgot to turn off of our notifications and we've got emails popping up,
Yeah,
the level of distraction and our ability to hear each other is so compromised by all of that. Who knows what we just understood, and who knows how conflict could go sideways.
absolutely. And I was saying, if that's going on for you, you might want to, like, if people say, well, I don't have enough time to do this, et cetera, et cetera. I would say, well, probably, yeah, that's true for you. And let's say that's the way you want it, right? Because it's amazing. We may not have exactly what we want, but we can get rid of what we don't want. And and I work with my clients like this as well myself. If there's something there I'm complaining about, after the first time I complain, if it's still there must be something I'm getting out of it being there. I wonder, I wonder what I get. Like, I remember I said to my wife, she was having a problem with my daughter when she was about 17, 16. And she's complaining about it. I go, honey, you've been complaining about Lizzie for a while now. What if this is what you wanted? How can you say this is what I want? And I say, well, I'm not saying like you're happy about it, but I'm saying that you'd rather have this than risk what you have now for what you really want. What if that was the case? That was a 2-day conversation that really opened up a lot for both of us, but particularly for my wife, because I learned a lot about her and what she was wrestling with my daughter and how I could support her. But she really opened up to, well, maybe I'm afraid to ask for what I want here because I don't think she'll agree or she will do it, or like she got into all kinds of great conversations, and it really helped. And we use that in our work. We notice that people are complaining over and over again. They're complaining, it's inauthentic, and it's a great opportunity for breakthrough. But if you think about it, a chronic complaint is usually a frustrated request. I'm afraid to make the request. I don't think it's possible. I think I'm going to be stuck with what I have for the rest of my life or whatever I'm up to. I don't see any possibility. And I'm depressed because I'm not really getting what I want, but I'm settling for a lot less. And that's why I'm complaining. So
I'm settling, and so I'm complaining. Yep, I'm settling
Yep.
for less because I don't think I can get what I want, or I don't see how to get what I want. Yep. Oh, I've seen so many examples of that recently. And that's a shift that we're making around here, is helping people and get empowered to get what they want. So I want to go back to that first one, which actually might be a really smooth transition here, which is that first step, getting clear about what the conflict is about. So maybe you have been complaining, right? Listeners, maybe you have been complaining, maybe you have been whining about the same thing over and over, sounding a bit like a broken record. Or maybe you're frustrated because you haven't been able to surface that conflict. You haven't been able to really ask for that thing.
You need language for it, right? And that's what this preparation can help you do, is like, just start talking about the issue, just start writing. And then write down an example of where that keeps coming up, and that'll help you get clear about it. Right? That's why I spend time journaling. That's one of the best things about journaling.
Yeah. Dan, can you give us any examples of workplace examples where that has showed up, where you've helped people get clear on what the conflict is about, or how those examples, how they start to see it? Journaling is one example that you've said, but what, like, some for instances to help us brainstorm?
Yeah. Well, so for instance, I worked with a CEO who had basically a concierge company, very big concierge company. And they were making a transition. They were taking on public money. They were going to do a bunch of improvements. And the investors invest in teams. They want to see that they got the right team. And she had a really powerful team. And her CFO, she kept complaining about her CFO. And I said, what's the complaint about, let's say, Joan? I'll just make a name up. And she said, well, I can't seem to get her to raise money. And she's the CFO, and we're in a raise because we're going to make this big move. And I said, well, have you asked her why? What's up? And she goes, yeah, I have, but she keeps telling me all the circumstances. But I know that if she, these people, I mean, I don't get that she's really pitching them. I said, well, have you told her that? She said, no, I haven't told her that. I said, so the issue for you is what? Well, it's I don't get she keeps us. I don't think she's giving me 100%. I don't think she's really committed to raising with the rest of the team. And this is why. And then she mentioned, I went to dinner with her with two of her friends that are potential LPs or, investors, and she never even mentioned it. And when I brought it up, she changed the subject. So there's a good example. So, right.
Yeah.
So when I said, now, why do you suppose she didn't? Well, long story short, as we went through the preparation, she started realizing there might be a whole set of conversations underneath this that she's never accessed because she's too busy trying to get her to do something instead of understanding where she's at.
Mm.
So in the discussion, so I sat down, we prepared, and we went through this whole preparation process. And then I sat with her to help her to kind of mediate, but mainly to hear what was there. And the other person was really candid and straightforward when she started talking about it. She goes, well, I raised money for a company I had before I came to work for you. You know that. And the company failed. And I'm afraid to go back to the people that invested and ask again because I'm afraid, and she goes, well, do you think we're going to fail? She goes, I don't know, but I'm still carrying that concern. And then I just asked her, what do you need so that you can be confident that what you're doing is worth the ask? Like what's missing for you with the team, with the gal, Lynn, who is the CEO? What is it that, and we went through a litany of things. And then we went through the team and did the same thing with the executive team. And we raised all the money we needed within the next 90 days.
That's fantastic.
And she raised a ton. The CFO did a great job, but it took about 3 days of me. We met twice over 3 days, and then we met with a team, and then that was about a week and a half, and then the thing took off. But it was a matter of break. Does that make sense? It's a matter of, and it's like things are never the way they seem they are. I mean, and I've had it where somebody's had a judgment about me, and once they voiced the judgment, they were much clearer, and we were able to get on with what we were doing. And it's things like that. There's a saying we have in our company, which is, all business problems are people problems. All of them.
Yep.
And Harvard did a huge study on how come deals break down. What is the number one problem with deals breaking down is cognitive dissonance. That people, what they think is going on isn't going on, but they're acting on what they think is going on. So if you can get what's going on in people's heads out into the light in an open, safe manner where you're not trying to attack them, but you're wanting to learn what's wanted and needed. I always say, look, if it's not worth doing, we ought not do it, but let's get everything on the table. Let's see how big the issue is, the pie is, what can we do with it? So like that.
Really, really lovely. Thanks for that example. So Dan, as we're getting close to time here and we're wrapping up, this has been just really insightful. We got 6 steps to prepare for conflict. For our listeners, if you have not been listening or you got lost on where the 6 are, you got to go back to the beginning because this is really, really great stuff. We are trying to empower you as our listeners with the things that you can do to help take accountability for where you are, get hold of tools that you have right now to not suffer alone, to not be uncomfortable where you are right now, and to be prepared to move forward, to look to the future. I love the way Dan put that, to not look at blame and shame and credit as things of the past, but to look for taking accountability and responsibility for the future so that we can move forward. Just really, really beautiful. Dan, as we are wrapping up, one of my trademark questions is, what's making you even better these days?
Well, a number of things. The 2 things I'm really into is I've been exercising quite a bit and pushing myself beyond. I'm 68 years old and I want to stay healthy. So I've been pushing myself beyond what I normally think I could do. That's been fantastic. And I spend a lot of time teaching my grandchildren how to read and to read to them. I love doing that. And so those are 2 things. And then on the client basis, I've just been reaching out to clients that I have been intimidated by and saying, look, let's talk. And that's been very helpful.
Oh, fantastic. So if our listeners want to reach out to you, of course, they can reach out to us and we'll connect them with you. But otherwise, if they want to find you directly, what's the best way for them to do that, Dan?
LinkedIn is one. And then takenewground.com. And we have a podcast called the Naked Leadership Podcast, 200 episodes right now. And that's on Spotify and Apple.
Fantastic.
All right.
Fantastic. All right, Dan, thank you so much for your time today. What a joy to spend time with you and to get to know you. And thank you so much for sharing these insights.
Thank you, Sinikka. You are a fantastic host. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a joy. And to all our listeners, thank you so much for listening in. And we hope on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, we hope the rest of your day is even better.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.